Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we have a Kickstarter preview for the next one from Garphill Games. This is Architects of the West Kingdom. It's going to look a lot like Raiders of the North Sea in terms of its DNA, but it is definitely its own game for sure.
Yeah, so this is also from Shem Phillips and co-designer S.J. McDonald. Actually, it hit I think 2 of our top 5 most anticipated games this year. I think Gary and Ryan both picked this one. We love Raiders of the North Sea. I think you just played it for the first time this year. It came out 3 years ago, and I got to tell you guys, if you haven't played Raiders of the North Sea with the expansions Hall of Heroes and Fields of Fame, it is a fantastic worker placement game. So we're super excited to cover this one because it's another worker placement game, right?
Yeah, this one, though, turns it on its ear a little bit, at least related to Raiders.
Yeah.
In Raiders, you're putting one worker on the board and then pulling one worker off. It's sort of tit for tat. This one, everyone starts with 20 workers. And for the most part, you're filling them on the board, and for the most part, they're staying on the board unless you do some things to get them back.
So this is a prototype version of the game. However, most of the art's done. Let's talk about these components and what you're trying to do. So the idea within the game is that everybody at the table is contributing architects to this kingdom. You have a king who wants to have all these unique different types of buildings built into his kingdom. These buildings that you build are going to give you victory points at the end of the game. They're also going to possibly give you
immediate
effects when you play them. The game board itself has a number of different worker placement spots on them. The difference with this and Raiders of the North Sea is that most of these spots, any number of workers can be in them, including multiples of the same players. The trick here with this game is that the more workers you have in spots, typically the more resources you may gather or the more actions you may take in them. So there's a huge significance to playing multiple workers down into specific spots. There are 3 spots in the game, and only 3 spots in the game where only one worker can go to.
Yeah, and one thing right off the bat that we need to address is virtue. Virtue is a big part of this game. Along the left-hand side of the board, you'll see the virtue track. Virtue is going to go up, it's going to go down in this game depending on how you play. The more virtue you have at the end of the game is going to score you some points. You're going to lose some points if you are low on the virtue track. However, and we'll get into this in a moment, that will bring along with it some benefits as you play.
All right, so over here you have the apprentices. The apprentices are needed to build specific types of buildings. They also give you ongoing abilities throughout the entire game. Some of them may modify specific places that you go to on the board. You have a building stack. This building stack are the buildings that you're going to be building in front of you. As we said, these are victory points at the end of the game or one-time instant abilities when you build them into your tableau. Over here you have the black market. The black market has both a small market and a large market. These are places you can go to give up some coin, to maybe lose some virtue in order to gain some resources if you can't gather them from other places up on the board. You have a number of different worker placement spots. We'll get to those in a moment. Over here, you have the rewards. The rewards track is used when you build the cathedral. The cathedral, think of it as kind of a pyramid. Anyone can get onto the first couple tracks, and then it gets smaller, so there's kind of a race to build that cathedral. Anytime you contribute to that cathedral, you are allowed to gain a reward card. The number of reward cards in the game is equal to times 2 the number of players plus 1.
Right.
And then each player has a player board in front of them. Now this player board is double-sided. On one side is a standard side, which means everyone starts with the same number of resources. Everyone starts in the same spot on the virtue track. However, on the back side, it gives you player powers, basically. And it also tells you where you may start here, how many coins you may start with, and you may even start with some workers in different locations to start the game.
Right. There's even a player that starts with a large number, almost half of their workers, in the prison.
Right.
So the variable player powers are very interesting, but like Jeremy said, we have this set up as a standard game.
Yep.
The only difference being that first player is going to start with 3 coins, and then every other player is going to get 1 more coin.
You also have a variety of resources. Again, these resources are used to build the buildings. Now, to start the game, playing the standard game, you're going to pick a first player. That player is going to get 3 coins to start, and then you're going to get 4, 5, and 6, depending upon where they sit in the turn order. Also, you're going to draft some buildings. Each player is going to be given 4 random buildings off the top of the stack. You're going to pick one of these, put them face down in front of you, and then pass the other cards to your left until you have 3 cards, and the last one you're going to ditch. Everyone starts with 3 building cards.
Yeah, and we should say on the building cards, there's a number of different things going on here. At the very top is probably one of the more important things long term, and that's the points. These are how you're going to be scoring, or one of the ways you're going to be scoring your points. Along the right-hand side are the basic resources you're going to need to actually build that building. However, at the very top right corner or left corner rather, you need to note you need a certain type of apprentice to build some buildings. In fact, some of these cards require multiple different types of apprentice to build a building. So there's a lot of requirements in some cases. Obviously, those will bring with them probably more points. And then finally, down at the bottom, on the buildings, you're going to find either an end of game scoring, where you can convert maybe all of your brick to victory points in this case, or some sort of immediate effect.
All right, let's start to explain these worker placement actions. Talk first about resource gathering worker placement spots. You have the quarry, the forest, and the mines, and then the silversmith. All these allow you to gain resources. We'll talk about these two first because they're the most basic. Anytime you place a worker into this spot, it says you gain one of that resource per guy that you have in that location. Remember, each turn, when it's your turn, you're placing one and only one worker. So at this spot, I'd simply gain one wood. If my worker stays in that spot and it comes back around to my turn, I could place a secondary worker here, meaning now I would gain 2 wood. So again, the more workers you have in a location, the more reward you get from it.
Yeah, it's probably one of the more thematic aspects of this worker placement game, because it really underscores the idea of putting forth your resources to gather even more.
Yep. The silversmith and the mines work kind of in the same way. However, the first time that you place there, you automatically get 1 for free. And each worker that you have there, you get 1 more. So your first one, you actually get 2 brick or 2 money. You also have the additional benefit down here of taking this ore action. This is collecting gold. Gold's kind of one of the rare resources in the game. You actually need 2, so your first action won't allow you to claim anything, but if I place a second one in there, I get to collect a gold. So for every 2, 4, 6, 8, you're collecting more and more gold.
Yeah, and the next location, it's tied very much into those resource spots, is the King's Storehouse. In the King's Storehouse, you're going to go there effectively to convert resources into other things. You can either trade in some resources to get virtue, or you can trade some resources to get marble, which is sort of the rarest of resources in the game. The interesting thing about the King's Storehouse, like the guardhouse, which we'll get to in a moment, this is a location where you're going to get 1 action per worker that you have there. Again, it's a more attractive space if you have more workers. What those workers allow you to do is to take more of those actions. So in this case, you could take 1 of these 2 actions. If you had another worker there, you could take 1 of each, or 2 of the same action.
Let's talk about the workshop down here. There's a variety of different spots within the game, in the guardhouse, in the workshop, and in the black market, and in the town center, where you're going to see coins as a payment in order to take those actions. Those payments come in 2 different colors. You have a red coin and then a brown coin. Anytime you see a red coin on the board, you're paying those to the tax stand. Those dollars or those coins actually go to this location. All your brown ones simply go back into the supply or the bank. So when I go down to the workshop, I'd pay 4, 2 of them to the tax stand and 2 of them to supply. Then I'm allowed to buy a single apprentice from one of these locations. You're going to notice that these are in columns from top to bottom, and between them you have a number of different workers. The one you get to interact with is typically equal to the number of workers that you have in that spot. So if I have 1 worker in the spot, that means I get to take 1 of these 2 apprentices by paying the coin. Now, you can break that rule.
Yeah, you can break that rule in like many other games we've seen recently. If you don't have enough workers and you really want that worker down at the other end, you can actually place a silver on all of the cards that you skip in order to pick up that worker. And if you were to take one of those workers later, or anyone was, they're going to get whatever coin is on that apprentice as well.
You could also possibly take the action of taking more building cards. Anytime you go there with a single worker, you automatically get 1 for free. However, for every 2 workers you have in that spot, you get to draw additional cards in your hand. That's how you're going to replenish your hand of building cards.
Now, we talked about taxes a little bit, so let's go over to the tax stand. The tax stand is simply a space that has a lot of money. This is where all of the taxes paid in the game is going to go to. If you go there, you're going to be able to basically take all the money. And it could be a lot of money. Here's the rub, though. You're going to lose 2 virtue as well. So you're going to go down on that virtue track. And take a moment to talk about one of the benefits. The lower you go on the virtue track has a couple different things going on. The benefit is that you're going to be able to start dodging taxes throughout the game. So the lower you go, you're going to start, maybe you don't have to pay 1 of the red coins, or maybe 2 of the red coins. However, if you have no virtue, they also don't want you at the cathedral. So you cannot then contribute to building in the cathedral.
The higher you go up on the track means you're getting victory points at the end of the game. However, you aren't allowed to interact with the black market at a specific location. So there is a rub from going too high or for going too low. You kind of want to stay in that middle ground and progress towards the higher ground at the end of the game because it's giving you the victory
Exactly.
points. There's also benefits and detriments from going too low. Every time you go below 0, you're actually taking some debt cards, which are awful. And if you go too high, you're allowed to get rid of debt cards. So there's some benefit from going high and low in those locations. Let's talk next about the black market because that's important. This location, the black market, the town center, and the guardhouse all kind of function in the same type of way. They all interact with one another in some specific way. So the black market is kind of a place for smugglers and bad people, right?
Those with low virtue.
Yes. So going to any one of these locations is a single spot where only one player can occupy. To go there, you have to pay up coin to the bank, and then you also lose virtue. You then get to interact with the spot that is directly below it. So you have the small market here, you get the building or apprentice spot here, and then you have the large market in this location. Going to these locations allows you to either collect resources or to gather an apprentice for free or to possibly draw 5 cards and pick one building that you think you can possibly build through the course of the game. However, being in the black market is bad because once all 3 of these spots are filled, it is going to signify a black market reset.
Right. The black market reset we'll get to in a moment because part of explaining that is going to require you to understand the town center and the guardhouse.
Yeah, let's go to the town center then.
Yeah, the town center is probably, well, not probably, it is easily the interactive spot in the game.
Yeah.
Because when you go to the town center, you're going to go there with 1 worker and 1 coin that gets paid to the tax stand, and that allows you to do the following. You're going to be able to look at any one location on the board and take all of 1 colored worker from that location and bring them back to your player board.
Even your own.
It can be your own, it can be another player's. If they're your own, they just simply come back to your supply. If they're another player's, you're going to take all of their color from that location and put them in this one little small location on your player board. This is sort of a holding ground, if you will, until you, on a later turn, can take another action that will take them to the prison or the guardhouse over there, which is some place that player is going to have to go to get them out.
So why are you trying to do this? There's 2 main reasons why you're trying to do this. Number 1, you don't want a large conglomerations of 1 player's workers in a spot because they're going to be abusing that by getting more actions out of those spots or more resources out of that spot. So you kind of want to thin out their availability to do a lot of different actions in a spot. Number 2, as you send those guys to prison, you're going to be collecting coin for them. So you want to collect as many coin as you can by getting as many different prisoners on your player board. Now, you can also capture other players' workers in the same spot by spending additional workers and additional coins. So in that spot that he just took 3 red workers, if there were also green workers in that, he could spend more money to also capture those to a spot, giving him more people to send to prison.
Yeah, exactly. That is how the town center works. And now you have to understand how the guardhouse works. The guardhouse, like the king's storehouse, is one of those spaces where you're going to get a number of actions equal to the number of workers you have there. But the guardhouse has a lot of different actions.
Yep, so the first action is you get 1 coin for sending all of the people from your player board to prison. So David could send all 5 of his people into the prison and collect 5 coin. That's one of the possible actions that you can take. A second action is to release all of your people from prison back to your supply. So if all these were in prison for my player, I could simply go to this location and say, oh, I'm taking all my guys back and they're now freed.
Now the next spot actually allows you to get your guys back before they go to prison. If you go to the guardhouse, you have to spend a fair amount of money. You're spending 5 coin, 2 of which go to the tax stand, or you're actually taking a debt card and losing a virtue. This allows you to reach over, take all of your players back from someone's player board that they've taken before they're able to send them to prison.
And the final one here is to spend 6 to turn over one of your debt cards to its positive side. If you end the game with debt cards, you're losing victory points. Also, when you flip it over, you're gaining virtue. So there's huge incentive to get those flipped over. Now, why did we talk about the black market and how do you obtain debt cards? It's all tied into the guardhouse itself. So the black market is going to reset in 2 different ways. One, when all 3 spots are occupied. That's going to immediately signify that the black market is resetting. The other way is here on the Guildhall track. When you meet certain locations on it by placing workers, it's going to reset. Let's talk about what a reset means. First, all the people that were in the black market are then going to immediately be sent to prison. There's no way of breaking them out. They're in prison. The second thing that happens is that the card on the small market is going to turn over, creating a new small market, and a new large market for players to obtain. The third thing that happens is you're going to look over here and see what happens during the black market reset. The first thing that happens is any player that has 3 people in prison automatically loses a virtue. That's done.
A minimum of 3.
Yes. And then the player that has the most in that location is going to gain a debt, and they're going to place it on their side of the table. And again, those are negative victory points at the end of the game if you aren't able to flip them by going to this location.
Yeah, and these prisoners stay put.
Yeah.
This reset doesn't mean that everyone gets those worker back.
Yeah.
They just stay there. So what you're going to learn throughout the game is if you have a lot of people in prison, you're going to want to get them out of there because otherwise you're going to be taking a lot of debt cards.
The last location we're going to explain is the crux of the entire game. That's the guild hall over here. This is a location that you can go to. Instead of being a worker placement spot, you simply take your guy and you lay him into the first uppermost on the left location. That guy's out of the game permanently, but it allows you to do one of 2 things. It allows you to contribute to the cathedral or to build one of your buildings from your hand. Now, let's talk about the cathedral. As we said, this is kind of a stair step. Only a certain number of players can be in these locations, so you can actually block out players from getting higher up on them. When you contribute to the cathedral, you're basically giving away a building from your hand, so you have to have these in your hand, and then you're giving away a number of resources to move up on that track. These are victory points at the end of the game.
Yeah, these can be significant points too. That first rung on the cathedral track is 2 points, but then it's 4, 7, 12, and then there's only one spot at the top for one player to get 20 points from the cathedral track.
And you're going to keep doing this round after round after round until this entire thing fills up on the bottom row, depending upon the number of players. So you'll have to have all these filled up to 3 players, 4 players, or 5 players. And then you're going to tally up all the victory points. There's a variety of different ways to get victory points.
Yeah, the 3 main ways of victory points, we've talked about this already. One is the victory points that are simply on the buildings that you've built in front of you. The second thing is the cathedral points that we just went over. And then finally, the third main area is going to be that virtue track. If you're high on the virtue track, you're going to score up to 7 points at the top of that. You can lose as many as 9 points on the bottom of the virtue track.
But that's not all. There's other ways to score or lose victory points. Any of your debt cards that you have in front of you are going to make you lose victory points. You have 2 rare resources. These are each worth 1 victory point apiece for how many you have in front of you. Every 10 coins is worth a victory point. And you're going to lose 1 victory point for every 2 people you have in the prison at the end of the game.
Yeah, and you must not also forget there's a lot of those end-of-game scoring elements at the bottom of the building cards. So some of those can play a significant role in points as well.
So yeah, if you guys have played Raiders of the North Sea or Shipwrights or Explorers, you're going to have a very good basic understanding of how this game plays. It holds a lot of the same mechanics. You're going to be ultimately familiar with all the artwork anyway, right? It uses a lot of the same iconography, so you're going to probably jump right in and understand the game right like that.
Right, this game feels completely familiar, but completely different all at the same time.
Yeah.
I really, it's amazing how they've gone from 1 worker on, 1 worker off with Raiders to 20 workers, mostly on. And like I said, feels very familiar, but an incredibly different type of game.
It's a very quick playing game too. You're simply placing a worker, taking the action. I also love the fact that you can have multiple workers in a spot and really getting juicier benefits from it. It makes you think about your actions and also not placing too many because you know they're going to be sent to prison if you're collecting too many rewards for them. Guys, this is Architects of the West Kingdom from Garphill Games, Shem Phillips, S.J. McDonald. If you guys have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.